Hello, guys. This is my review for the brand new 2022 reboot of the Batman. This one is directed by Matt Reeves and stars Robert Pattinson as the titular character and features him in a neo-noir detective crime thriller where Batman is uncovering clues left by the Riddler, who is trying to destroy the hierarchy of the grimy, corrupt Gotham City. And this pretty much is a Batman film that I've always wanted to see. It's something stylistically and tonally I think we need for the character. And while also, yes, the Dark Knight trilogy were crime thrillers and were very dark and grounded, they never really had the style that this movie is trying to achieve. A full neo-noir. You have Batman with a voiceover, you have this very moody, intimidating film, and of course, it is 3 hours long, and my does that fly by because this movie is magnificently paced. It's so swift for that 3 hours that, surprisingly, I actually left wanting so much more out of a movie that was 3 hours long, even though I was satisfied with everything that was here. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about the Batman. I will not be getting into any spoilers in this video, so you're safe if you've not seen the movie. And if you haven't seen it, just go and watch it. It is magnificent, but let me get this on with my review. I'm going to start with a few of the issues I have with the movie first, because I don't think it's flawless, and it is not my favorite Batman film. I do still love the Dark Knight trilogy, and I would say The Dark Knight is still my favorite Batman movie, but that may change after seeing this again. I just think The Dark Knight has a greater final half. The final half of The Dark Knight is probably one of my favorite final halves in cinema history. Everything just comes colliding together, and Heath Ledger's Joker is magnificent. The Batman, I don't think, has quite as satisfying or as thrilling final act. Or final battle, shall we say. I like how it didn't go the blockbuster approach. It keeps it simple. It keeps the tone going. I do like that the majority of this movie did stand alone and didn't feel like it was setting up anything, but its own story didn't lead to quite as much in the finale as I was hoping to, and I didn't like the final half an hour as much as the first 2.5 hours, which I thought were pretty much perfection, and I was sat in awe at. That's my only issue with the movie, but maybe it's just, my built-up expectation of having this big third act, and this movie wasn't necessarily about that. It was about the choices that he made in that third act, and what was happening to society, and how Riddler's plan all came into play. That's more what about the third act is about, and less about the big beady-up action sequences. So I completely understand that. I just felt like for 3 hours long, I felt like I needed a bit more of that oomph towards the end, but damn did I still have a very satisfying experience with this movie. I'd much rather have a movie like this than a studio-related feel film like all the Marvel movies or the DCEU. I'd rather have a movie that feels, looks like this, and even though it is devoid of humor and some levity, it has emotion, it has weight, it has gravitas, it has pure epicness, and it has a really compelling crime mystery thriller that never loses grasp of its story or its characters in place and how each of these things that the Riddler is doing is affecting everyone around him, including Robert Pattinson as Batman, which I will say this is my favorite incarnation of the character yet. Even though the Dark Knight trilogy, I think, maybe has a better Bruce Wayne and overall arc for the character, but we've seen 3 movies with Christian Bale's character. Robert Pattinson, to me, is the greatest incarnation in cinema of the character we have had. I love all the other Batmen as well. I think Michael Keaton is probably the most underrated. He's a classic, but Robert Pattinson has now taken the cake for me as my favorite Batman. And we get a lot of him with the suit. There's very little Bruce Wayne than you expect, because most of the movie he is the Batman. It's more of Bruce Wayne kind of feels like his mysterious older ego in this. What is Bruce Wayne up to? Who is he in society? Whereas this focuses more on everyone knows who Batman is, and he knows who he is as Batman, but he doesn't necessarily know who he is as Bruce Wayne yet. And I loved that switch on the narrative there, and it made it feel less like a superhero movie and much more like a detective vigilante film. He doesn't really do any superhero stuff really until the very end. And I liked the entire arc of this Batman. He sees himself as vengeance. He's getting vengeance across the city. He sees himself as the shadows. He's a more violent, younger, unhinged character, and that comes through in his voiceover, but also in his very subtle actions that Pattinson plays off perfectly in a very emo-type performance. You can really tell that he's a lonely character. He's isolated, You really feel that in his head that he really has nothing left. And I absolutely loved his character, and I love how it brought back the themes of fear that the other ones do. He fears who he is himself, how far he can push himself, and I think that made for a really interesting character because the Batman character has always been about him overcoming that fear, and here he overcomes something different, and that's the fact that yes, we've seen this before, but what Gotham sort of needs him to be. He's in this movie he's set up as this vigilante who just fights crime. And at the end of the movie, it's more about how he needs to focus more on actually saving people than fighting all the bad guys. It's less about himself. He has sort of this ego that he feels like everything about him. He feels like Riddler's plan was all about him, but he realizes actually maybe it was affecting everyone else more. I love that, and I like how Riddler made it personal. There was a connection there between the two characters, and I think Paul Dano is amazing as the Riddler. What a unhinged, magnificent, and underused performance, because they don't use him often, but when they do, he shines so much. Colin Farrell is unrecognizable as the Penguin. I loved this incarnation of Catwoman as well. We got a lot more time with her than we have with the other two Catwomans. Michelle Pfeiffer and Danny DeVito and everyone, even Jim Carrey as Riddler, have that classical goofiness that I love, and their characters are so otherworldly that I kind of love them more. But these ones feel so much more grounded and like real people. And also this version of Commissioner Gordon I think is fantastic and really well acted. Basically, because the movie is so fast-paced, you don't realize how little action there actually is, but when there is these action sequences, they are brilliantly shot. The cinematography in this movie is striking. The look, the rainy Gothic Gotham City, everything about the look and feel and atmosphere of this movie is magnificent. The use of close-ups, shadowy wides, it's just absolutely a beautifully made film. And the action sequences run on for a long time, and they know when to cut and when to not. There's these quick, short bursts of action, a chase sequence with the Penguin that we've seen in the trailers that was goosebump inducing, and there was moments where I was sat there on my seat. I was like laughing and smiling out of control because what I was seeing was so well crafted, and it's everything I've wanted to see from a Batman character. It felt like a pure thriller. It felt just very noir. I love crime noir. I love that style of filmmaking, and they brought that to this movie very to a modern effect, and I really love that. The postmodernness is definitely seen in this. The inspiration Matt Reeves has taken from other classics, stuff like the works of David Fincher or 50s crime thrillers, or even some of the Batman comics, and even aspects of the Dark Knight trilogy and Tim Burton's films are brought into this as well that I really loved. But he has made it feel his complete own. We have never seen a Batman movie, or a superhero movie for that matter, like this before, and I thought it was extremely impressive. I had goosebumps from beginning to end. I loved the musical score as well. There is a hint of Imperial March in there that I heard, but I still loved it. It's by far the Batman theme that's really stuck in my head, and after watching all the Batman films before this, I can say this one is my favorite incarnation of the character on screen. It's not the most perfect Batman movie. I think The Dark Knight is still better, but in terms of the style, the tone, and the way the character is presented, this may be my favorite, and I loved it. It doesn't quite have as many emotional moments as you expect, but it still has them there. It's more about the mood and the atmosphere and the overall story that I think that make this one so impressive. And the fact that a 3-hour film that gave me so much of what I wanted left me urging for more is extremely impressive. I was satisfied, but I left the cinema going, I could have watched hours more of that. And you know what? That's exactly what the movie is trying to achieve. And I thought the Batman was miraculous. I'm going to give the Batman an A. And I'm also going to give it a 95%. Check this out in the cinema. I'm definitely going again. Guys, thanks for watching. And remember, I'm vengeance.